Hey, Clemson family. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I'm Daniel Shirley. I am mad, and there's plenty of reasons to be mad after what we saw Saturday against South Carolina.
I think our Twitter feed during the game reflected that. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to episode 45 of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. We're glad you found us on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Give us a follow or subscribe. We will keep you caught up on analysis of the Tigers and keep doing it as a free podcast. Let's get right to it so that we can get through it. That felt like the most dire 1-point loss in the history of Clemson football, if you ask me, or at least in the decades that I've been following it. The game itself reminded me a lot of last year's NC State game, except with the stakes higher, and against an arch rival, it just became that much more torturous. Getting into the X's and O's, I just don't understand abandoning the running game.
Bill, I 100% agree. I'm sitting in the press box, and I'm thinking, why are the running backs not touching the ball in the fourth quarter of a close game? It was mind-boggling to see what was going on. And I know you and I are texting, and yeah, if you want to see full-on Daniel, look at our Twitter feed from Saturday afternoon and see what I was thinking during the game. But they were running the ball well. They were running the ball to the outside well. South Carolina didn't stop the outside run most of that game, if at all. And they just went away from it and abandoned it. And I don't know why. And I'm sitting next to Pete Iacobelli, the great writer from the Associated Press. And he said, you know, Clemson's advantage in this game is the running backs and the tight ends. And they're not using either one. And Phil was 100% right. In that fourth quarter, they did not get the ball to the running backs enough. And after the game, you know, Brandon Streeter said, yeah, we should have done that. And Dabo Swinney said, yeah, we should have done that. And if I can tell you that sitting in the press box with my limited X's and O's knowledge, you would think the coaching staff would be able to figure that out and change it during the game. That should be changed on the fly and not, oh, yeah, we should have done that after the game. It was really frustrating to watch that and did not make a lot of sense.
It doesn't, and it also does not surprise me. Swinney has always wanted a balanced attack. You and I have talked in the past about, what was it? I think the 2015 game up at Louisville where it seemed like Wayne Gallman was getting 7 yards anytime he touched the ball, and they'd get away from the run, force the passing game. Watson was not sharp that night, but that's what they kept doing. That's what they kept forcing. So this is not the first time they've done it. It's just rare that South Carolina has a team that's good enough to challenge you when you're not in your peak form. And boy, the Tigers were not in their peak form. I'd like to know if there were RPOs that Uiagalelei was just making decisions strictly by the numbers. South Carolina had X number of men up to stop the run or in the box rather than by what was working, because whenever South Carolina had however many guys they had up there, Clemson was running the ball very well. Or was it just poor play calling? Were there design pass plays that, you know, weren't decisions to be made on the field? These post-snap reads that they've talked about much of the season under Brandon Streeter in his first year as offensive coordinator. Do me a favor, plant a bug in the meeting room and let me hear what really was the cause of this, because we're not getting specifics out of the post-game interviews from anyone on the coaching staff.
No, we're not. And that's to be expected. They're not going to give away too much. And they're not going to, you know, go after the quarterback. They're not going to go after, you know, the players for the most part. There was some talk about the drops. That bugged me. I was more worried about the game plan than I was the drops or DJ. I know people want to throw DJ under the bus, and he wasn't good. That's fine. But did the coaching staff put him in the right position to win the game? And it did not feel like they did Saturday. So, you know, I'm way more concerned about what is the offense trying to accomplish than how DJ played or the receivers dropping the passes. I know that all those things are tied together, obviously, because it's hard to call a game plan if you don't know that the quarterback can get it done and you don't know the receivers can get it done. Well, here's the thing with that. You know who has gotten it done this year? The running game, the running backs and the offensive line. And they were getting it done Saturday as well, and they went away from it. And it just does not make sense. I know we'll talk about the North Carolina game later in the week, but I feel very little confidence that they can win that game because of what we saw Saturday. What's going to be different next week based off of what we saw this past Saturday? And are they going to say, well, okay, we need to just run the ball and win the game? we heard Brandon Streeter say, well, we're trying to get the wide receivers confidence. I don't think that's your job. Your job is to win that game Saturday at all costs. And they didn't get it done.
Amen. You mentioned the Twitter account. Follow us there at Clemson Kickoff, and the same handle on Instagram as well. Let's move over to the defense. I've talked about how Dabo Swinney, after 2015, instituted a quote unquote bend but don't break defense. So much for that. I mean, that was not the case. They got beaten over the top repeatedly, just enough times for South Carolina to put enough points on the board to steal the game. From some of the things that Swinney said in outlining that not everything was DJ Uyunglele's fault, he did let it slip that the safeties apparently were, I'll extrapolate that the safeties were to blame for some of the problems during the game. I thought this defense would do a much better job affecting Spencer Rattler than they did. And they got the safety and they had some key sacks, but Rattler was tough enough and not challenged often enough that he was able to steady himself and execute the game plan that the South Carolina Gamecocks had.
I'm even more disappointed in the defense than I am the offense, because are there limitations at offense? Probably. But I don't think there are those limitations on the defense. The talent is there, but that group has not gotten the job done a lot of times this year. And have they gotten it done some? Yeah, sure. But that's the consistency that we talked about. Remember the first half of the year where we talked about this defense and it needed to be more consistent and do your job and don't try to play hero ball and do everybody else's job? Well, they went right back to that Saturday. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the safeties, and you just mentioned that, and they struggled. Mickens getting ejected really hurt. But that's no excuse. It happened. But even before that, South Carolina was big play after big play after big play. And you give up 360 yards of passing offense. That's not just on the safeties. That's a complete meltdown. And, that's an entire unit not getting the job done. I don't know what has gone on with this defense this year or what has gone wrong with this defense, but it has not lived up to what we thought it was going to be. There was a lot of talk in the preseason about a dominant defense, and this defensive line's as good as we've ever had. And even as we've talked about the linebackers and how they've improved, this defense has just not gotten the job done like it should have with the talent that is in that group.
Secondary really struggled. I would say the corners had a bad day too. It just surprised me that there wasn't a better plan in place to really account for all options. And especially after what you just saw South Carolina do to Tennessee the week prior, how are you not ready for them to go ahead and take deep shots? How do you not have something to say, hey, you know what? Okay, they're going to take deep shots. Yeah, we can't stop them from completing all of them, but how do we contain the damage when they do complete one? Because the damage was not contained to a high enough degree.
And we heard all week, oh, well, they got our attention, right? After what you saw South Carolina do to Tennessee. And Clemson, you felt like the defense was getting healthy. And, the couple weeks before, they played really well, but they didn't play an offense like they played Saturday. And Spencer Rattler, the last 2 weeks, looks like the guy that everybody thought was going to be the number one pick in the draft 2 years ago. And he's going to win the Heisman and all that stuff. The team just did not feel like it was prepared for this game. Even after, look, Jeremiah Trotter, great play, pick six. The stadium is rocking, right? I mean, it's as loud as I've heard it in a few years. Touchdown, it's 14-0. Okay, they're going to show South Carolina what it is. And then after that, South Carolina dominated that game. Dominated in all aspects of the game. And then Clemson helps them with the turnovers. And how long have we been talking about turnovers this year? And then the coaching staff gets asked about it. And it's just like, and I know this isn't the case, but it's almost like they're like, oh, well, those don't matter. Those are bad luck. Those things happen in waves. Those things come, but good teams don't make those mistakes. Not this many weeks in a row. Maybe you have a bad week or two, but not this many weeks where they've had 3 turnovers in every single game. I mean, well-coached teams don't do that, and prepared teams don't do that. And that's what is shocking to me about this group, because the first half of the season, they didn't turn the ball over. They weren't having these issues. Were they the most explosive offense ever? No. but they weren't helping the other team. And you look at the 2 losses, the punt block at Notre Dame, the 2 interceptions, and then these turnovers Saturday, that cost you a chance to have a special, special year. And I know that you can still win the ACC title, and that's great. But there was something else on the horizon for this team, and they didn't get it done because of just terrible fundamentals and terrible mistakes.
That explosive 14-0 start, but then what was the phrase I used last week? Get up and let up. And it sure seemed to happen. If they were a prepared team, if they were a team whose attention had been gotten by their opponent the previous week, it vanished. It went away. Before the show, and you and I were prepping and getting ready and talking about what we were going to talk about, I was definitely the calmer voice of the two of us, but I'm not going to mince words about that. You can't just get up 14-0 and decide, oh, okay, this is how it's going to be all day. What was the other thing I said in last week's episode? South Carolina is going to come in very determined to knock 2 teams out of the playoff 2 weeks in a row and to finish the season on an upswing. That is exactly what Clemson allowed South Carolina to do. And I am absolutely disappointed. One of the major websites covering Clemson put it right there in a headline. It was a shock, and I would agree. Unfortunately, by the end of the game, just from an X and O standpoint, just from logic and seeing what was happening on the field, it was not a shock that Clemson gave up the lead and then couldn't come back and reclaim it. How it happened was pretty surprising to me. One of the best players of the year on offense, Antonio Williams, coughing up the ball. Another time, one of the best players on the team, Phil Maffa, coughing up the ball. Just disappointing all around. But I am keeping that perspective all along of this is a coaching staff that has accomplished a lot in recent years. You can be heartbroken that the streak against South Carolina is over, but this is a staff that by and large has built that 7-game winning streak over South Carolina. This is a staff that by and large has built so many years in a row of 10 wins, 40 straight home wins. I mean, do they bounce back next week against North Carolina? There's no guarantee. But I'll tell you what, I know that this Tigers team has a strong chance to go in and win that game. Once the ball is kicked off, I'm going to feel like, hey, this is one we got to watch. There's been way too many years in my decades of following Clemson football closely that has not been the case, that there have been games where Clemson lined up and you just thought, man, I hope this isn't a total drubbing. I hope they keep it close. I don't expect that to be the case next week. As we start looking ahead to this game, I won't expect that to be the case as we start looking ahead to a bowl game eventually once that picture takes shape. And I won't expect that to be the case next year, despite a lot of holes on the roster that we'll be talking about during the offseason.
You're a lot more optimistic than I am. Let's just say that. I don't know how they stopped North Carolina after what I saw Saturday. I mean, Bill, I saw a defense that South Carolina's passing game had them on their heels, and they didn't have an answer for it. And the big plays, after it got to be 14-0, and you're thinking, okay, it's 14-0, go out there and, like you said, put your foot on their throat and end this game right now. Right now. But South Carolina dominated after that spot. And South Carolina was the better coach team. They had the better scheme on offense. They had more talent at quarterback. They had more talent at wide receiver. And that was on full display Saturday. I think Clemson has a better defense than South Carolina. They have more talent, but they didn't show it Saturday. And that's the thing. Like, if you'd have told me at the start of the game, yeah, South Carolina's going to win, it's going to be 31-30, it's going to be a back and forth game and all this, well, okay, that stinks, right? You hate that. And I probably would be more in your line of thinking if that was the case. But when you get up 14-0 and you're at home and you haven't lost a home game in a long time, and you haven't lost to this group in a long time, and you've got a chance to go to the playoff if you win this game and then win Saturday against North Carolina, where was the focus? Where was the, hey guys, this ain't happening on our watch? Where was the leadership? And a lot of that stuff was lacking Saturday. Now, is it the end of the program and all? No, I'm not going to say that. It's one game. But it's also not one game. It's been 2 years of the program kind of taking a step back. and things not being what we're used to them being. Is it ever going to get back to that point? Who knows? You can't say one way or the other, no matter what some national folks want to say about the program. But for Saturday, when you're up 14-0, a team that's focused, a team with leadership, a team that has got something in it, does not give up that lead. And there was some stuff lacking Saturday for sure. Is it talent? Is it coaching? Is it injuries? What is it? It's all of it for sure. I don't think it's one thing that cost them this game Saturday, but there's some holes in this program that need to be fixed right now. And, this offseason, whatever, something has to change if they're going to get things back to, being in the playoff and being a team that has a chance to win a national title. Bill, when I watch Georgia and I watch Michigan and I watch Alabama and Ohio State this year, I don't think this Clemson team wants any part of those teams. Tennessee, I just don't think they're on that same level with those teams this year.
Well, Alabama's got 2 losses just the same. So if it's going to be all about results, there is a certain similarity in the levels that Alabama and Clemson are now on this year. By the way, check out our website, clemsonkickoff.com. That's our homepage. You can catch all our episodes there. You can go back and listen to how wrong we were about so many things going into this South Carolina game, and even back to our season preview of the South Carolina game. Let's talk about a couple of things that will be changing. One of them next year. Both are on the recruiting front, and it's wide receiver Tyler Brown out of Greenville High. He's a 3-star on most services. He committed Thanksgiving Day to the Clemson Tigers. He will be likely the 4th receiver of the class. We had Jeremy Johnson on here from On 3 telling us that he expects Tink Kelly out of Daniel High to have a good shot to contribute at receiver. He's technically an athlete. You've also got Noble Johnson out of Texas and Ronan Hannafin out of Massachusetts. And boy, Saturday more than ever, you would think these guys are looking and saying, yeah, I can get out there and contribute.
I think this class is going to be huge next year coming in, Bill, and there are going to be chances for this group to play. We've seen Antonio Williams contribute as a true freshman. I think we probably would have seen Adam Randall contribute as a true freshman if he doesn't tear his ACL in the spring. And he's played a little bit. He hasn't contributed much, but he has played some. So this group is going to have to step up because there are holes at wide receiver. I know a lot of people talk about wide receiver U and all that. This group is not that, and it's a long way away from that. Something has to change with the wide receiver position. I don't know what that change has to be. Other people can speculate about that, but there needs to be an influx in talent. There needs to be an influx in fundamentals. How many drops did we see Saturday? Where, I know DJ didn't play well, but if you catch, 5 drops, 6 drops, if you catch 3 of those, that could have been a different game Saturday just because of those drop passes. So there's going to have to be something that changes at wide receiver.
Then for the 2024 class, Clemson has a commitment now from kicker Nolan Hauser, one of the best in the country, according to some of the services out there. Of course, kickers don't get stars on recruiting services. Certainly has the ability to address a future need, although it's a ways off, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's family ties with this young man. His dad, Scott, played baseball at Clemson. His mom, Sherry, played soccer. His sister, Ella, is on the soccer team right now. So this is a legacy commit as far as athletics for the Hauser family. And we'll see what he brings. It's just so far off now to know. But he's a talented kicker. You look at his stats, he's one of the best kickers in North Carolina. So we'll see what he brings to the program when he officially signs.
Hauser out of Cornelius, North Carolina. Again, 2024 is a way off, but the kicking services are saying he's one of the top kickers, perhaps the top kicker in the country. You never know how the senior season is going to go. You hope he's going to progress and keep getting better. You love to have those Clemson family ties in there, of course. A lot still to take shape with the 2023 class, though. Some updates saying Chris Johnson out of South Florida is starting to favor the Tigers. We'll see how that recruitment goes. This class does still need to add a running back.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, look, I think if you said what's the best position on the current team, it's running back. But they need more depth. They need, some speed. I think that's kind of the biggest thing lacking right now on this offense is there's not really a guy where you go, man, he's a burner. And, you know, we're used to seeing burners on these offenses. So they do need some speed, and he would be a great one. So if he's the guy, I think that would be a great addition. If not, they need to go get a running back somewhere, and they need to get some speed in that position group and on this offense as a whole.
Glad to have a couple more guys in the fold. More certainly will be on the way. None of them can help next week against North Carolina. We will start previewing that clash with the Tar Heels in our next episode. That game is Saturday in Charlotte, 8 p.m. Eastern. A lot at stake, I think, public perception-wise, for Dabo Swinney and for the Clemson Tigers in whether or not they get a win or a loss. An eyeball test doesn't matter at this point. Get the W.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk from the assistant coaches today about turning the page and all those things that they've got to say the right things. And Dabo said, you know, if you lose this game, it's worse than losing the state championship. I don't know that I agree with him on that. From somebody who grew up in South Carolina, I would not agree with that. But if you win this week, there is a kind of a reset, right? And then you go win the bowl and you're 12-2, and it's not the earth is falling apart. But if you lose this week and then you lose the bowl and you're 10-4, I think there's going to have to be a big time reset coming up this offseason.
You talk about the Avengers and this Clemson team. I don't think they'll find all 6 Infinity Stones in 1 week, but hopefully they find enough to be effective against North Carolina in the state of North Carolina. We will preview that game in our next episode, and we are glad you found us. Follow us on social media at Clemson Kickoff. Check out our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. Give us a subscribe on YouTube, a follow on your favorite podcast. We will keep you posted on all the latest. Until that next episode previewing the North Carolina game, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.